This is your urgent call to action. We are all called to lead in a world in chaos, crisis, and turmoil. Join a pivotal global movement for change to transform the leadership crisis worldwide. Will you play it safe, or will you wake up, step up, and speak out? Like Nelson Mandela did for South Africa and the world, we need a radical new way to think, act, and lead, leading boldly into the future. Join host Ann Pratt, a Harvard Fellow and multi-awarded businesswoman, and unlock the best version of yourself to revolutionize leadership with what the world needs now.
Greetings to all you future bold leaders. Thank you for joining us from around the world. My name is Ann Pratt, formerly from South Africa, and relocated abroad to attend a Harvard Leadership Fellowship in Boston, Massachusetts, in the United States of America. Our bold leader joins us today from a rural area called Bungoma, on the western border of the East African country Kenya, next to its African country Uganda. She is a qualified commercial attorney and advocate of the Kenyan High Court. She spent more than 15 years working for a large, successful, multinational Shell Limited, not only in their London office, but looking after their legal departments and operations in more than 23 African countries. She is the former chair for the Institute for Certified Public Secretaries for Kenya and is the founder of the Women on Board Network and the Young Women on Board Network to help develop young leaders, girls and boys alike, to close the gender gap at board level. Stay with us as we learn how her childhood system and family setup of a parliamentarian system embedded very strong leadership lessons and moral courage. Why, even though being offered to pay bribes in a very large tender contract, even during the startup of her newly established consulting business, was and is non-negotiable. And why she believes that exercising leadership is a service to humanity, and how her Mandela moment inspired her to be of service to young boys and girls, to develop them as young leaders, to come onto boards in the future, because it always seems impossible until it is done. We warmly welcome Catherine Musakali, and welcome to Leading Boldly into the Future. So, Catherine, it's so wonderful to have you with us today. I'm super excited that you could join us from your country home in the western part of Kenya. And thank you for being part of this conversation about leading boldly into the future.
Thank you for asking me, and I'm really looking forward to speaking with you. And
could you just share with us and our audience what brings you to your country home, which I believe is quite a farming area and community on the border of Kenya and Uganda? What brings you to your country home?
So I come from a very large family. I come from a family of 10. So I have 4 brothers and 5 sisters. Can you believe that?
Oh, goodness.
And we are a very close-knit family. So once in a while, one of us hosts the rest, actually on a monthly basis. So we rotate around brothers and sisters and their families. And so it was our turn to host our family, which we did over Saturday and Sunday. It was a great get-together with family. And we have a small farm here. We do a little bit of farming. So it's also an opportunity for us to check up on what is going on at the farm, say hello to our dogs, and yeah.
That's great. You know, you raised quite an important point, Catherine. I mean, from a point of, you know, when I think about leadership and the importance of us managing ourselves and creating these spaces of sanctuary and safety, what is it about coming to these rural farming areas that help nurture you and this close sense of family and community? How important is that?
You know, it is what I grew up with. It is what I have known and continue to live. When I was growing up, my father ran our home like parliamentary sessions. So during holidays, we would always gather around our family home around the fire. And my father had designated himself the president of our home. And my mother was designated as the vice president and minister for home affairs. And then my brothers and sisters had ministerial posts. I had a brother who was minister for finance. I had a sister who was minister for agriculture. I had another one who was minister for education, all sorts of things. And so during the holidays, we would gather around the fire and we will start these cabinet meetings and everybody will report into my father. And so there was this whole sense of family that was instilled in me, that we always had to be home. And my father would not let anybody out of the home past 9 p.m., So I have grown up with family surrounding me. I value family to bits. And when I got married and my brothers and sisters also got married, we have continued with those family meetings. And so on a monthly basis, believe it or not, we go around each other's homes. And now our children as well have started a similar setting. So they go around each other's homes, supporting each other. They have a WhatsApp group. We have a WhatsApp group. It's amazing. I mean, family is just a place where you go and relax and be yourself and, just let go. And I love it to bits.
So I'm curious, what ministerial post did you hold in your family when you were a child? And what ministerial post or position do you hold today?
So interestingly, Anne, I did not have a ministerial post because, I am ninth born out of a family of 10. And so it was felt that I was too young to hold a ministerial post. And so what my dad did was to designate me his minute taker. I'm not surprised that I became a lawyer. I'm not surprised that I became a company secretary because I was so used to taking down notes and reporting back and keeping the records and all. That is the position I held, the official record keeper of the family back then. What post do I hold now? Interestingly, my husband, who happens to be a medical doctor, is the chairman of the family unit, and I am the treasurer.
You're the treasurer.
The treasurer of that family unit. So it's crazy. I mean, money and lawyers. Well,
but I actually find it fascinating, and when I think about how in leadership, and often I say to people, share your childhood story, because there's so much about that childhood that shapes us. And when I think about how you've transitioned from being your dad's minute taker to current treasurer, and yet in your career you then moved into law as an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, and you've also consulted to the International Finance Corporation, affiliated with the World Bank. Here you are acting out these experiences on a global stage. I mean, I find it fascinating and heartwarming.
Thank you, Anne. Over the weekend, we were just speaking about my dad. He passed on in 1989. And we were just reminiscing about him. Thank you. We're reminiscing about him and the lessons that he passed over to us. And interestingly, he passed on such important lessons to us. And as my sisters and brothers shared their lessons through the stories that were told to us, it's amazing what leadership lessons we learned. I learned my humility through my father. I learned giving of myself from my father. I learned, just taking responsibility and leading others and being courageous from my father. But the most important lesson that just stood out for me over the weekend, really, as we were speaking, was the fact that a leader should always walk away from the heat, walk away from, don't get angry. When things are hot, walk away and then come back and deal with it. And that's what he did all the time that he was with us. He passed on important lessons to us.
That's so powerful. And what you're saying is it's walk away in the heat of the moment, regulate those emotions, and then come back and still deal with the issue.
Exactly. One of my sisters was telling us how she did not like the school that she had been taken to by my father. And because my father had taught her to be courageous, she just walked up to the headmistress and said, "You know what? I don't like this school. I'm going away." And so the headmistress said to her, "Call your father." She said, "I'm going to tell him myself." And so she literally left school and took public transport back home. And lo and behold, as she was alighting from the public transport, my father was close by. And he literally crossed the road to her and said, "My daughter, is there something wrong? Is there a problem?"
Yeah.
And she said, "I just don't like school." He said, "Here, let me help you carry your box, your suitcase, whatever." So he helped her carry the suitcase. Thinking about it, if I was in his shoes, perhaps the first thing would be, "Why are you here?" But he literally just, he said, "My daughter, what is the problem?" For me, that was so powerful.
How old was she, Catherine?
She was around 15 years old. She was around 15 years old when she left. Can you believe it? And he didn't get upset with her. He let her talk. And then he trusted her. And then later he went on to tell her about the consequences of her actions, and he kept on reminding her about the consequences of her actions. I thought that was so powerful.
And when he spoke about the consequences, were the consequences positive and negative, or, did he fully support her decision, or was he concerned?
He was concerned, and he kept on pointing out to her, because what happened is when she reached home, my brother-in-law said he would help her find a job instead of going back to school.
Yeah.
And so my father said to her, my father was a teacher by profession. He said, "You can get a job and you can get a lot of money, but remember that in future, you will not have a certificate to support any ventures that you may want. So these are the two options. You can have the money now, or you can have education now and go wherever you want to go." And it was a lesson that was so powerful for me because he laid out, the consequences of her actions to her. She made a choice, of course. And she later went back to school, by the way. She took the job, but she later went back to school. Yeah. So it is only over the weekend that she revealed to us why she went back to school. She went back to school because she wanted to do it for my father, which was amazing.
That's amazing.
But I need to tell you something else about my father, which I learned over the weekend. This weekend was just so amazing for me.
Yeah.
Because I was much younger, so I didn't get some of these stories. And so I've been picking them up as I grew older. One of the ones that I picked up over the weekend was that my father, whenever my mother got a baby, he cooked for her personally for 1 month. Personally. This was a Kenyan man cooking for his wife for 1 month. Now, we had help in the house.
Yes.
People who washed and cooked for us in the house. But he would not let them cook for his wife for the first 1 month after getting babies. That was amazing for me.
What was his thinking? And why a month? Do you know?
I think it was his sense of protection. He was protecting his wife and just making sure that everything was working okay as it should be. Perhaps it was his way of showing love to her as well. Perhaps it was his way of saying, hey, we are in this together. I just don't know. But it was, I mean, any man would have just given orders about what needs to be cooked.
That really went against the norm, which in a way is his own example of his courageous actions to make different choices. And even if they were in opposition to the cultural norms of the day and the time and the place.
Correct. I mean, for me, that was amazing. But he was liberated in a certain way, in some aspects, and not liberated in others, of course. I mean, there were other stories about, what he did, which showed that he was a traditional African man. But in this particular one, I just, my God, this was amazing that he would actually do that. And, there were 10 of us, which means he cooked for 10 months of his life.
Well, by the time he got to you, Catherine, he must have been quite a good cook because it's... Yeah. That's wonderful.
Interestingly, how he built his home is that there was a kitchenette that was attached to the bedroom. I never understood why there was a kitchenette there. I mean, we had another kitchen that was the main kitchen, but he had a kitchenette there. And I never understood. Only over the weekend that was it revealed to me that is where he used to make meals for my mother.
And what does your mother say about his cooking?
My mother loved his cooking. My father was a very, very, very good cook. I mean, I learned my French toast, making French toast for my father. I learned making cauliflower from my father. So he was a very, very good cook.
That's wonderful. Well, you know what they say about, if you want to find your way to a person's heart, cook them a beautiful meal. So clearly it did.
Exactly.
What was your father's name, Catherine?
My father's name was Francis. So my firstborn is also called Francis.
Yeah.
His last name was Musakali. I still carry his last name.
Carry his name. Wonderful.
Yes,
wonderful.
I still carry his name.
Bless his soul. He sounds like a wonderful human
Amen
being.
to that.
Yeah.
Amen to that.
So if we pivot slightly, you've shared a wonderful story of not only his own courage, but your sister's courage. Can you take us back to a moment in time where you had to make a bold, courageous decision, a difficult time? What was that? Can you paint a picture? How did you feel at the time?
So let me give an example of when I worked for Shell, the multinational, for about 15 years. And then I had to leave Shell in 2013. And when I left Shell, because there was a business restructuring and Shell sold its business in Africa. So I left Shell and I decided to set up my own consultancy, which I still run up to now.
Yeah.
At the time that I set up, of course, it's always difficult setting up a consultancy at a time when I did not expect to step out. I knew I wanted to go into consultancy, but I did not know it was going to come that quickly. So I set up the consultancy in August of 2013, And it was still a struggling consultancy. In 2014, early 2014, I got approached by a friend of mine who said to me, Catherine, there is this big tender that you can win if you wish. Actually, it's literally given. If you want to take it, it's yours for the taking. So I said, what contract is this? She said it is a $2 million contract over a period of 2 years.
Yeah.
And all you have to do is provide health and safety services. I said, I've never done health and safety, but I know what it is. And I can put together a team. She said, yeah, that's what you need to do for a particular contract. And because my business was struggling, I mean, that was a huge sum. I was like, are you sure that's what needs to be done? She said, yes, I'm sure. It's as simple as that. I even started painting in my head the type of structure, organizational structure I was going to have, so on and so forth, everything in place. I knew I was set. I was going to earn a lot of money even before my consultancy was a year old.
Yeah.
Wait until I had the deal. So she says, okay, I'm going to introduce you to the gentleman who's responsible for this contract.
And was it a government or a private sector? What kind of organization was it with?
It was a government project. It was a government project. So they were going to contract out to a private person to do the type of work. So when I met this gentleman, then he says to me, okay, have you done this type of work before? And I said, well, I've been in the management team, and Shell is very heavy on health and safety and everything. And part of the management team, of course, I know how to do it. He said, okay, you sound like you can do it. I said, yes, I'll put together. This is the structure. I walked him through the structure. This is what I'll deliver in the first year. In the second year, I'll deliver this. And he said, good. We're good to go. And he said, but there are a few things you need to know. Of that $2 million US, which is to be paid over a period of 2 years, X amount has to go to so-and-so, X amount has to go to so-and-so. I was like, what exactly are you saying? And he's like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I said, I'm sorry, I'm not taking it. He said, what do you mean you're not taking?
Were these people in the government or were they private citizens?
They were private citizens. So I guess what was happening behind the scenes was it was tenderpreneuring of sorts. Yeah. So I said to them,
and they weren't going to add strategic value to the project in any way.
No, they were not. Yeah. I mean, I didn't know what they were going to do. So I said to them, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do it. He said, are you sure? I mean, how can you walk away from that amount of money? I said, it is tempting, I know. And I would do a lot with that type of money. But I'm sorry, I'm not going to take it because I'm not wired that way.
Yeah.
And so he said, oh, you're stupid and you will die poor. I said, do I look poor? I'm quite comfortable with who I am, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I walked away and left the contract. Why do I say it was a difficult? I mean, it wasn't an easy decision because $2 million over 2 years is a lot of money.
Of course.
But I knew from day one that I'm not wired that way. I'm not interested because I would not be able to sleep with myself, just thinking about doing the wrong thing. And I have never learned to do those sorts of things and said, I'm not going to start, whether I am struggling in my consultancy or not. And I'm glad I did it.
So what was the outcome? Did he give that contract to somebody else who you think sort of...
I actually walked away and decided I'm not even going to find out what happened. But I have never met him up to now.
That's an interesting point, Catherine, because, you know, this whole issue of, I mean, you're an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. You know, you've worked for multinationals like Shell in London. And of course, you know, I know you had scope for commercial contracts and transactions across 23 African countries. How best do you think people who are sitting in your kind of position in corporations today, where there is pressure to bend the rules, to reframe, you know, there are many corporate failures, there are many public office failures. What would your advice be to people who feel that they're caught up in a situation that they don't feel comfortable with, but they need the paycheck at the end of the month, and they don't immediately see a way through? What would you say to those people about how to navigate that situation? Whether it be, I mean, your earlier example was in the public office, but there are also many corporate failures of wrongdoing and corruption and misdemeanors. What would you say to those people?
Interestingly, Anne, I was just having that type of conversation with my daughter perhaps about 15 minutes before our call.
Wow.
And I was telling her this: you do the right thing, not because somebody is watching, but because you believe it is the right thing to do. And I gave her the example of a traffic policeman. You don't drive slowly because the policeman is waiting. I mean, is watching you. You drive slowly because it's the right thing to do. You don't bend traffic rules because there are traffic lights. I mean, because there are cameras. You do the right thing. And at the end of the day, you are accountable to yourself and you're accountable to your God. So it doesn't matter whether anybody else is telling you to do the right thing. Are you going to be able to talk to your inner self and convince your inner self that you did the right thing? Hell no, you're not. So the advice I would give to somebody who is going through that is, it may look like an easy thing to do now, but if you're not wired that way, you will always struggle even in the future, and it will be difficult to forgive yourself. So do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, not because somebody else is watching.
And what would you say to the people who are perhaps on the fence? Some people would say, well, I'll do it this time. I can't afford to walk away from this job right now. I'm 50-50. What would you say to those people, Catherine?
Once you start going down a cliff, it's very difficult to go back.
Yeah.
So if you're sitting on a fence and you make this one decision to continue going downhill, that's the way, there's no turning back. So I would advise them that deep down as human beings, we are made to be good people. And every time you do the wrong thing, you're going against humanity, the humanness in you, the Ubuntu, as you would say, in you.
Yeah.
And so the right thing to do gives you peace. The right thing to do gives you sleep at night. The right thing to do ensures that you are at peace with anybody. And it allows you and gives you that latitude to really live your own life the way you want to do. Because once you do the wrong thing, then somebody else is almost holding strings on you and can twist and turn you any way they want.
Yeah. And it's hard for people to come back from that. Yeah.
Correct.
So, in your corporate career, I know you shared that example of when you were in your own consulting business, but when you were working, I think you spent 15 years with Shell and, you worked in London. Do you have an example of where there were a difficult time, where there were these cross-border, cross-cultural differences around people's approach to good governance, to good ethics? Was there a moment when there were these cultural differences that challenged the corporate head office or challenged you or your team around good corporate governance?
The beautiful thing about Shell is that it had a very big emphasis on ethics and accountability and doing the right thing at all times. So it was, if you followed the Shell way, then you just learned to do the right thing for the right reasons. And so I, as head of legal, for example, way back in around 2012, I believe, or around October 2012, I was, of course, in charge of legal matters, so on and so forth. So many times I would get approached by people to compromise their matters. And of course, I would say no. And yes, it would have made, perhaps I would have walked away with some nice paycheck for doing the wrong thing. But I would never have been happy with myself. And so I have come across in the corporate world, and also even after leaving Shell, sitting on the various boards that I sit, I have come across circumstances where people are almost wanting to do the wrong thing, but I've always stood for the right thing. And for me, it's a no-brainer, really. It's, am I going to sleep with myself at night if I do this?
So, I think that's a really important point. Maybe if you can just step back one moment, how would you define good corporate governance and what standards do you use? Do you use the King 4 reports from, Mervyn King, who has done a lot of work, not only in South Africa, but around the world in terms of international reporting and governance? How do you define good corporate governance, and what standards do you work to in designing and implementing good corporate governance?
It's interesting you mentioned Marvin King. He's somebody I admire greatly because of the work that he has done in the corporate governance field. And I love corporate governance to bits. I can do corporate governance until morning and not feel tired at all. And I've had the fortune of sharing a stage with him twice here in Kenya. So how do I define corporate governance? I define corporate governance as the way we do things around here. In my world, that is corporate governance. So in whatever organization that you're sitting in, what are those policies and procedures that define how you operate? What are those policies and procedures that define the way you relate with your stakeholders? Now we are talking about ESG, environmental social governance.
Yeah.
What rules do you have? What goals do you have around environmental social governance? Actually, the whole corporate governance is really just around environmental social governance. Each of the parameters fit in one of those three pillars, which is really interesting. So here in Kenya, what standard do we ascribe to? We have our own codes of corporate governance. The public sector, for example, the state corporations have their own code of corporate governance, which I was fortunate to lead the development of. And that one is called Mwongozo, the Code of Corporate Governance for State-Owned Entities. So that is the standard that they are held to in terms of their corporate governance. It defines the role of the board. It defines the general principles that should be followed by the state corporation. It defines the role of management. And it also sets out the type of policies that every board must have in order to have an effective corporate governance framework. We do also have a code of corporate governance for listed entities in the private sector. Although, let me not say the private sector, because we do have some state corporations which are listed, but it's listed companies, both from the public or private sector. They also have a code of corporate governance for issuers of securities on the Nairobi Securities Exchange. And that code, again, I was privileged to lead the development of that code, again, defines the principles of corporate governance, defines the practices of corporate governance that listed entities are expected to adhere to. Then we have another code of corporate governance for private entities which are not listed. And this code was developed again under my direction, under the auspices of the Institute of Certified Secretaries of Kenya. And again, it is similar to the other two codes. The beauty about these three codes, and perhaps I'm fortunate to have led the development of those three codes, is they speak to the same general principles. And so should we as a country decide to go the South African route, where we have one code for all the entities, whether public, private, NGOs, so on and so forth, it is quite easy to actually consolidate those three codes into one.
And in terms of developing those frameworks, Catherine, where did you source those principles? What did you base it on? Was it on the King 4 reports, or where did you draw from to define those frameworks for Kenya?
Okay. I got thrust into this work actually by accident. I guess, again, I'm just going back to what my father has always told me about courage and raising your hand and saying, I can do this, So way back in 2014, I had a client, and I had gone to the outskirts of Nairobi to deliver a board evaluation report to one of my clients, who's the biggest referral hospital here in Nairobi, called the Kenyatta National Hospital. And while I was there, I met a gentleman who worked at the time. His name is Simon Indimoli, who worked at the time for the State Corporations Advisory Committee. This is a committee that oversees the operations of all state-owned entities. And he had come to see the same client, but over a different subject. And he mentioned to me that the State Corporations Advisory Committee was looking for an international expert to help them develop a code of corporate governance for state-owned entities. And the reason was because His Excellency, the President, Uhuru Kenyatta, had put in place a task force for the restructuring of public-owned entities, state-owned entities. And one of the recommendations out of that task force was to have a unified code of corporate governance. And so this gentleman said to me, they are going to put out a tender for them to get an international expert to help them put together that code. At that point in time, I was the chair of the Institute of Certified Secretaries of Kenya, which is a governance institution. And so I said to the gentleman, you know what? You can't put out an international tender. We are here and we can draft this code for you. He said, are you sure you can do it? I said, yes, of course we can do it. I had no clue how to draft a code of corporate governance. But I said it in jest, and he said, are you sure? I said, yes, of course I'm sure. He said, can you give me, it was a Friday, can you give me the outline of the proposed code by Monday morning? I said, of course I can. So I drove back to Nairobi and I did all my research. I looked at the Malaysian code. I looked at King 4 at the time. I looked at other codes within the European Union. I looked at the UK combined code, and so on and so forth. And ultimately, I came up with the outline, and I gave it to him on Monday. And I said, this is how the chapters should look. And he was so happy that he had actually gotten an outline for his code. I had no clue what the contents would be, but I just, I did the outline and I gave it to him based on the research that I had done. So then he said, okay.
Sorry, Karen. Yeah.
He said, okay, can you put together a team that will help you draft this code? I said, yes, I will. And so I went back to the institute and we put together a team, 6 of us, myself and 5 others, to actually put together that code. And because the State Corporations Advisory Committee wanted it in a very short period of time, we just said, we'll divide the chapters. Each of us would write a chapter each. We'll come together, we'll challenge, we'll, support each other to put it together. And the rest is history. We put it together, we wrote it, and so we used available literature. We looked at King 4 at the time. We looked at the Malaysian code mainly, and put together a code that we believed was good for the country. And so after that, then I went on to the other code as well.
That's great. And I mean, these are wonderful international codes. What made you select? We know Professor Mervyn King really established some global benchmarks around that. And King 4 and his work has been applauded around the world. But what made you select not only King 4, but perhaps the Malaysian model, parts of the UK model? What made you decide to draw on those particular frameworks?
First and foremost, of course, King 4 being an African code, so to speak, I knew that it had the African flavor and it took into account, the nuances that come with the African culture. So that was one. The second one, which is the Malaysian code, was because of its simplicity. It was written in a very simple but powerful way. It was quite a short code, actually, Malaysian code at that point in time. And I just loved the way it was simply done, and it was straight and straightforward to the point. And because the State Corporations Advisory Committee was looking for a very simply written, so to speak, but powerful code. So that's why I looked into that. Then, of course, I looked into the UK code as well. And OECD, I looked at the OECD principles as well. The beauty about corporate governance is that the basic principles are the same across the world. It is just the applicability of those principles that may differ from country to country. But otherwise, the basic principles are the same anywhere.
You know, you made an interesting point, Catherine, about how, you know, in terms of environmental, social, and governance standards and structures, that it's about being cognizant of multiple stakeholders, which is a deviation from how capitalism ordinarily worked and historically worked, in terms of really being seen as, you know, being accountable to shareholders alone. How do you think this shift to multiple stakeholders is relevant and powerful in terms of the current issues we are dealing with in the world today?
You know, when I was in school, campus that is, when I was taking my law degree, you are right. We were always told acting in the best interest of the shareholders.
Yeah.
So when I started practicing company corporate governance, that's when the shift to in the best interest of the stakeholders came in. So you're not just looking at your shareholders, you're looking at the broader body of stakeholders. And the reason is really simple. The reason is we are living in an interconnected world. And unless society gives you a license to operate, then you cannot just support the capitalistic approach that was there previously, because you can be delivering a lot of money to your shareholders. But if the stakeholders don't feel you, if the stakeholders don't buy into your vision, ultimately your business is not sustainable in the long run.
Is there a particular example of an organization that comes to mind that has not heeded the call for a more sustainable, multi-stakeholder approach, and has, do you have a particular example in mind where an organization has not succeeded, and what perhaps you have learned from that kind of organization?
So this is a state corporation which, in my view, missed the boat in terms of ESG.
Yeah.
And missed the boat in terms of focusing on the future, which is all about, you know, corporate governance should help you focus on the future. Corporate governance should ensure that the board is talking strategy at all times and talking policy and letting management get on with the job.
Yeah.
So if I see an organization which is failing miserably in its strategy, and failing miserably in the sense that it has no more business to do, it means that the board was not forward-looking enough. The board was not thinking sustainable. The board was not thinking about the future. And we do have such an organization in Kenya. In fact, let me just say it. For me, that is the Postal Corporation of Kenya. And you know the one that would just, you mail your letters and you send them out and so on and so forth, and you have a post office box around the corner. Who's doing that anymore with emails and with WhatsApp calls and whatever? So it is just, I think, this year that organization is now starting to wake up and to say, oh, now we are going to deliver things using drones, Ooh, I think it's a bit late. It should have done that a few years back. So that for me is an organization which missed the boat in terms of when to make sure that it's focusing on the future, missed the boat in terms of ESG. What it means is that it did not put in place specific goals with regard to ESG, and also ensuring that it had a license to operate from the stakeholders.
You make such an important point, Catherine, about focusing on the future. And if we think about not only the responsibility, but the duty and the obligations of leaders or people who hold positions of power to make sure that we're navigating the future in a responsible, dutiful, and courageous way. What are the big issues, not only on the African continent, but in the world today? What are the kind of three big issues that keep you awake at night, concerned about the future?
I think the biggest one for me, which is a global issue really, is this whole issue around digitization.
Yeah.
Digitization, I think, is keeping a lot of board members and directors concerned, because your whole strategy could be thrown out of the window, not in years, but it could be done in a matter of days, a matter of months, just because of revolutionizing the way services and goods are delivered to customers.
So when you talk about this digital revolution, are you talking about it from a commercial point of view, or are you talking about it from a commercial point of view, but also how digitization can be used for good intent or ill intent? Which aspects?
Correct. So it's actually both. It's actually both. From even a social perspective, research has been done that there will be more gadgets connected than people. And so for me, that's why I hang on to my family. That's why we keep meeting. Because how many gadgets do I have today? I have, sitting just here with you, I can see 3 gadgets around me. And they're speaking to each other already, When did I last speak to my brother? When did I last speak to my sister? When did I speak to my children? That for me scares me. And the people, the humanness in us, the connectedness in us that we have, you with your friends and you with your colleagues, it's not going to be the same for our children. They are spending more time with their gadgets than developing relationships out there. And so this digitization wave is scary in the sense that we are going to have people who are very lonely around other people because they are just concentrating on their gadget. And I think that's why there's a spike. And I don't know whether in other parts of the world this has been seen, but reading the data that I'm reading, mental health is an issue across the world. Mental health is an issue. It's a big issue around the world. And I think it's a big issue around the world, and it's been contributed to by this digitization wave. We don't wake up and go to our neighbor's house to find out how they are. I can be here in my house and I have no clue who is my neighbor. Growing up, that never used to happen,
But so even worse, Catherine, families are now communicating down corridors using text. It's
it's crazy. So that for me is one of the biggest issues that concerns me today. And in fact, the other issues are, perhaps simpler to deal with than that one. The second issue that concerns me really is the fact that we have, as human beings, we are starting to be very self-centered. Previously we were more, we thought more about other people. I remember growing up in the village, and this is a very simple example, but I think very illustrative. I remember growing up in the village, and whenever we had chicken for dinner, my father would send us with a piece of chicken to take to our neighbor,
Yeah.
I mean, we don't do that anymore. So we are very self-centered as human beings. I go to visit my mother. I go to visit my mother-in-law. I don't know whether when I'm old, my kids will come and visit me when I'm visiting my mother, you know. So that's another issue that really, really scares me. Globalization is both a positive thing, but it can also be a negative thing if we don't handle it well, you know. Positive in the sense that the world is now at our fingertips.
Sure.
I can be here in Kenya, but I'm working in London. I'm working in other parts of the world. And so the opportunities that come with globalization are immense. But at the same time, unless we are careful about some of the trends in other parts of the world, which are not aligned to our cultural values, we can lose ourselves as people. So that
Can you
for me,
expand
those
on
for
that a
me are
little?
those.
I mean, when you talk about that, can you expand a little on that? I mean, can you give us an example?
So one of the examples that perhaps I can say is here in Kenya, and I guess other parts of the world, family is king. You know, I don't think it's the same everywhere. And with this globalization, we are starting to see people becoming individualistic and forgetting our cultural values that we grew up with, you know, that type of thing. That's just one example of our cultural values that we could easily lose with globalization.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. Just shifting slightly to a remarkable human being that we both love and admire and have been inspired by, you know, Africa's very own Nelson Mandela. Can you share with us, you know, a lot of the values you're talking about in terms of that human interconnectedness, that deep sense of compassion and caring? And of course, we know that, you know, perhaps one of the biggest sacrifices Mandela, or Madiba, as we fondly call him, sacrificed were the relations with his own family. You know, those were deeply hurtful and painful for him. Can you share a particular moment in time that was your Mandela moment, a moment where who he was, how he lived, how he led really opened your heart and perhaps changed your mind about leadership?
I think that the best example that I can give about what can I say, my Mandela moment is wanting to be the best that can be. He was a lawyer who was really first class in his own right, but he used his knowledge and education and values not for himself, but for other people. And so one of the moments that I can share with you is that when I was setting up the Women on Boards network, I actually...
What year was that, Catherine? What year was
the Women... 9th of April 2014. I remember it vividly. Yeah. So when this network was being set up, I put in my own money. I was just starting out my consultancy, which started in April of 2013, as I had said. And at that point in time, I had not broken even. But I said to myself, what would Madiba have done? And Madiba would have given of himself to other people. And so I put aside my own money to set up the network, which I have been supporting up to today. So I pay some of their bills, I pay their rent, I house them and pay hotel costs and so on and so forth. Why? Because I want to reach out to another woman. I want to give an opportunity to another woman to grow. I want to build their capacity so that they become the best they can be serving on a board. And this year, sorry, not this year, but 2 years ago, we decided to start a junior wing of Women on Boards network. So this one is catering for young girls and boys from around the age of 13. And we want to teach them leadership at a very early age so that they can grow up knowing that it is possible and it can be done. And we want them to be little Mandela-lets and Mandelas, just being the best they can be and leading people, but not just leading from a selfish perspective, but leading because they want to serve. It's about service. And that really is what stood out for me from Mandela's example.
When was the moment that you either read about him, watched a film, saw him on television? Do you remember a particular moment?
When I saw him walk out of prison, that for me is the moment. I mean, he walked out of prison having suffered for so long, and there was all that story about him almost starving, so on and so forth. But he walks out of prison and he's not bitter. He's not bitter. I mean, I had to ask myself, what type of man is this? And that's the time that I really got interested in reading a little more about him. I started reading up anything and everything I could find about him, and just to understand what was driving him. The whole story about him sacrificing himself, giving himself from his family to South Africa, for me was so powerful. I mean, the sacrifice of living or having to give up your wife. He didn't say it, but I could say it. I mean, the relationship broke because he was sacrificing for South Africa,
Yeah.
I mean, for me, that is just out of this world,
Mm-hmm.
It is. So every time I do something, I've got to ask myself, why are you doing this? Is it so that your name can become greater out there, or are you doing this to serve humanity? Because Mandela would do it to serve humanity.
Yeah. So, based on your discovery, in your opinion, what do you think it was that inspired him and moved him and motivated him to serve so selflessly? What do you think that was? I mean, we all have a different perspective of that, but I'm curious to hear yours.
I think I want to go back to what I said when I was starting Women on Boards Network. I said to myself, I can keep asking this question, but I know I'll keep getting the same answer, i.e., if I don't do it, who will? And I think for me, that is what drove Mandela. If I don't do this, if I don't make this sacrifice, who will? And so he chose to do it because he believed it was the right thing to do. He believed it is why he was born in the first place. He believed that is why he went to school and became a lawyer and had this knowledge. And so he used that knowledge to serve humanity.
Yeah, interesting. I'm curious about your little mini, your young woman on board initiative for men and women, creating these mini Mandelas. Just take us through your thinking about why young boys and girls for young woman on board network.
Okay. So the reason why we started the junior wing, first and foremost, we thought, okay, why not start it for young girls? But then I said to myself, if we start it for young girls, these same young girls are going to get so empowered, but they need husbands and partners and brothers who are equally empowered so that they can have a meaningful conversation and a meaningful relationship with them. If we create this set of powerful girls and we don't do the same for boys, it's going to create an imbalance in the future. So I then decided that it's best for us to start, make it available to both boys and girls. When they start working and they then become full members or are able to become full members of the Women on Boards network, then we shall hand over the boys to the Institute of Directors, so that they can continue being nurtured as part of the journey. And then we continue with the girls. I also want to say that at Women on Boards Network, we also have members who are actually male. So we will still give them the chance to continue being members of the network. Because ultimately, leadership has no gender. It doesn't have gender. It is leadership. It's just that we have different styles of leading. And so helping them develop those leadership qualities at a young age, and then later they can choose a path that best suits them.
So do you think Mandela's leadership blueprint and model is still relevant today? And if so, how and why?
The thing about Mandela's leadership style is because it goes to the core of who we are as human beings. And so that blueprint is as relevant today as it was relevant yesterday, as it will be relevant tomorrow. It is sustainable because it is based on who we are as human beings. It goes to the core of who a human being is. And so I think it's very, very relevant. I mean, when you think about compassion, when you think about integrity and all those nice principles that he stood for. And I don't see it changing in the near future, perhaps when robots have taken over, but not now.
I read a crazy article that the first scientists are even talking about robots procreating. I mean,
oh dear Lord.
Maybe it's sooner than we think, Catherine. It's
I know.
So some of these sci-fi movies are getting much closer than we realize.
Yeah,
interesting.
Hong Kong has in 2014, Hong Kong appointed the first robot to their board.
Wow.
Yes. So that was the first board member in 2014.
Just a couple of lighter, fun, fast facts. Over time, what has been one of your favorite books that you've read?
Play like a man, win like a girl.
And what was it about it that you enjoyed?
So it really is about the leadership style of women and how women can be the best they can be and become leaders in their own right.
Yes.
Of course, Mandela's book stands out for me. I remember when I read it, I had just visited South Africa and I got the book at the duty-free shop, and I read it. And it is a book that's the autobiography, really. It is a book that you can read. Long Walk to Freedom. Exactly. Long Walk to Freedom is a book that you can read over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And what I love about that book is that the simplicity, I guess I just love simplicity as well. The simplicity with which it is written. You can almost hear Mandela speaking through the pages of that book, Yeah. You really get to understand who he is through the pages of that book. And it's one of the most powerful books that I've read as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's moving and it's palpable, as you say. Just another quick, fun, fast fact. What is one of your favorite meals?
Cool. I love chicken. I can.
So there's times of moments of taking chicken to the neighbor. I mean, clearly chicken was a big part of your your life and
Yes, where I come from in Western Kenya, we love chicken. I love chicken. I can eat chicken for breakfast, lunch, and dinner 365 days and not get tired.
wow, that's incredible. How do you like it prepared? What sort of meat?
Grilled.
Grilled.
Grilled chicken is really my favorite. I don't like stewed chicken, so grilled, fried, deep fried, I would love that.
Interesting. And what is one thing about your husband that really stands out in terms of the uniqueness of him?
His compassion for his patients. He's a medical doctor, as I said. But I think sometimes that he forgets himself for his patients. He forgets his family for his patients. I see a lot of Mandela in him, actually. He really goes out of his way for his patients. And when I get to meet some of his patients, like I did recently, they speak so fondly about him. They speak about compassion. They speak about him taking time with them. They speak about, he doesn't even think about money. He doesn't think about how much it's going to cost them. He gives of himself. And I think that is what has been so attractive to me about him as well. So I see a lot of Mandela in him. But secondly, he's calm and collected no matter what.
Okay.
It's like nothing puzzles him. He will be in the storm of something, but he will look like it's all normal. So those are characteristics that I really admire in him.
Have you uncovered that secret recipe about this super calm and collected way of being, no matter what's going on?
I need to uncover it a little more, but when I was told about my father over the weekend, I'm starting to sort of connect the dots as well. And it boils down to emotional intelligence, really.
Of course.
It boils down to bite your tongue and wait, don't react in the heat of things. Wait.
Yeah. But I hate to break it to you, Catherine. Psychologists say we become one parent and we marry the other. So it seems like you became your mother and married your father. Are there any final thoughts or takeaways you'd like to share about the future of leadership, about moral courage, and any final thoughts about Mandela's message for the leaders of tomorrow?
So one of the things that I would like to emphasize is that leadership is about other people. And I think for Mandela, that was very, very clear. Leadership is not about me. It's about other people. And it is about helping other people see the vision as opposed to herding them into your vision. Leadership is about sacrifice. Leadership is not about glory for yourself. Leadership is about the whole group seeing the future together with you, as opposed to you seeing the future alone. And I think if half the leaders adopted that style, self-giving, almost emptying of yourself, compassion, just always thinking about other people, more than half of the problems we have today would actually be resolved themselves. So I think Mandela was such a powerful, powerful leader that many leaders today should spend time studying his blueprint and then just becoming who they are. And the beauty is, once you get it, it's just about being authentic. He was so authentic, It's about being authentic, being yourself, not, wanting to be somebody else, appreciating yourself for who you are and giving of yourself to other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Catherine Musakali, what a wonderful, fun time. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for the great work you're doing, not only in Kenya, but across the continent, and for sharing your wisdom, sharing of yourself, and sharing more about your wonderful family. Really, bless you. We thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. And thank you for that great chat. I really enjoyed myself as well. And I'm hoping that with the work that you're doing, and congratulations for that, with the work that you're doing, you're going to share this blueprint across the world so that many more of us go back into our inner self and adopt that style of leadership. Thank you very much and bless you as well.
Well, with your help, with your support, and with this collective movement, Catherine, I have no doubt that, with kindred spirits and people who really care about the future of leadership, collectively, we will do this. I look forward to that partnership. Friends, how many of you, like me, put yourself last in line? Thinking incorrectly that self-care is an unaffordable luxury to be enjoyed only when we can afford the time. Self-care is not a luxury or an indulgence. It is exercising leadership. My good friend Catherine Musakali, an advocate of the Kenyan High Court, diligently commits to her family, roots, and rituals, an anchor, together with her siblings, her close confidants, who regularly return to their rural home, a sacred sanctuary. Catherine and her 9 siblings grew up in Bungamo, a fertile western region in Kenya close to the Ugandan border and at the foot of the Elgon Mountain, the second highest peak in Kenya. Her late father ran the family and family affairs as a parliament. He was president, her mother was vice president and secretary of home affairs. Each sibling had a ministerial duty and function. Being the second youngest, Catherine was secretary and took the minutes and notes. Today, Catherine is a fellow of the Institute of Directors. She is the former head of legal of a large listed corporation, Shell Limited. She worked in London and ran the legal function, overseeing it in 23 African nations. She is also the winner of the coveted Order of Grand Warrior National Award, presented by His Excellency, the President of Kenya, and recognized for her outstanding work in institutionalizing good governance in her beloved country. Despite her demanding career, and in this age of digitalization, AI, and robots on boards, Catherine reminds us that rituals, anchors, and sanctuaries are central to our well-being, to our happiness, and leadership excellence. She and her siblings are disciplined in their regular and diligent attendance of family gatherings where family comes first. A place where those digital gadgets are put away, a time to relax, to enjoy, to share those childhood family stories, to learn more about their family and village history, a time to renew and to connect meaningfully. Like many of you, I'm a recovering workaholic in a world that rewards, admires, and applauds excessive work hours to chase the high numbers. In our executive search and leadership business, I worked 80 hours a week. I interviewed directors and executives on Saturdays. I coached and did assessments on Sundays. I proudly outperformed top consultants in London in terms of the number of assignments and British pound revenue. I wore the badge of burnout with honor until I learned the hard way. My body, my intimate relationships, and my health said, enough, no more. How many of you seldom find time and prioritize you and your nourishing rituals, anchors, and sanctuaries? With careers, a life where careers and children and spouses and digital gadgets are ahead in line and you stand last in line. A life where there is little or no time for daily walks or runs, for weekend hikes or leisurely weekends away. Life and leadership deserve and demand so much more. Living with purpose, achieving goals, and leaving a legacy require that we commit to self-care as a discipline in order to nourish, nurture, and renew. Advocate Catherine Musakali reminds us that exercising leadership, seeing yourself as a whole system, as a whole being, where rituals, anchors, and sanctuaries are core to your daily life and living, empower you to perform at your best and not only survive, but thrive. Self-care is not a luxury. It is not an indulgence. It is exercising leadership and leadership excellence. So until next time, remember that leading boldly is about making thoughtful, clear choices. And bold leadership is about taking bold action, just one small step at a time, one step for you. But together, in a world where we are honoring our rituals, our anchors, and our sanctuaries, a giant step for humanity. Take care and take thoughtful, bold action.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leading Boldly into the Future. Please find links and connections mentioned in this show in our blog and never miss an episode by subscribing at anne-pratt.com. That's ANNE-PRATT.com. May these insights from inspiring industry leaders, remarkable disruptors, and courageous champions of change bring forth a brand new you, emboldened, empowered, and ready to inspire hope. Come back soon, share with your friends, sign up on anne-pratt.com and join our movement for change. Why? Because the world needs you to lead boldly too.